Welcome back to Brother Wolf, Sister Moon Divination. Today I'd like to talk about the arc of the tarot. Each suit has its own arc. So we're going to look at cups, we're going to look at pentacles, we're going to look at wands, and we're going to look at swords. And how each one of these suits represents a story, of course, and we've talked about this with the analysis of the tarot through the lens of Carl Jung. And so we're going to explore these psychological archetypes through the arc of the suits. So each suit has something to tell us. So let's get into it. And so looking at each one of the suits, I like to start with cups. So cups, of course, are notorious for representing emotions. The symbol is water. And the pentacles represent earth, the symbol of earth, and relate to finances, work, health, material life. Then the wands are very fiery, passionate, and represent creativity, ambition, and action. And then lastly, the swords are air sign symbol, and represent more of the mind, thoughts, cognitions, communications, conflict, and clarity. And so each one is represented. And if you recall in my previous videos on the Major Arcana, when we examined the magician, on his altar are all four of these elements. So there's a wand, there's a pentacle, a cup, a sword, and so a really powerful symbol. These four elements, these mysterious archetypal elements. So let's get into it. We'll look at the arc of each suit in the Minor Arcana. So let's get into it. Okay, so let's start with the cups. And this is the heart's journey. And so when we look at the Ace of Cups, this represents emotional awakening. The Two of Cups represents mutual connection. Three of Cups represents community and celebration. The Four of Cups represents withdrawal and reevaluation. The Five of Cups represents grief and disappointment. The Six of Cups represents nostalgia and healing. The Seven of Cups, emotional choices and illusions. The Eight of Cups represents leaving what no longer fulfills. The Nine of Cups represents emotional satisfaction. The Ten of Cups, a very popular card certainly, represents lasting harmony and shared joy, success, family, friends, stability. The Page of Cups represents emotional curiosity. The Nine of Cups represents romantic pursuit, idealism, and in some cases, a sort of a foolish, sort of ungrounded romance. Maybe not exactly stable or completely genuine. The Queen of Cups represents emotional wisdom and compassion. The King of Cups represents emotional mastery and balance. So if we were to summarize this arc, we would say that the heart opens, bonds form, joy expands, stagnation hits, grief surfaces, healing begins, choices appear, deeper truth is sought, fulfillment arrives, and then lastly, emotional maturity develops. So let's move on to the pentacles. This is the material journey. The Ace of Pentacles represents material opportunity. The Two of Pentacles represents the balancing of priorities. The Three of Pentacles represents skill, building, and teamwork, craft, honing one's skills, creativity. The Four of Pentacles represents holding on tightly, and in a sense has a somewhat negative connotation in that life should be about give and take. And so it sort of is hinting at over preoccupation with material concerns, stinginess, which of course closes one off from new opportunities. The Five of Pentacles represents material struggle and bad choices, making a choice that you know better and you still do, and then pay the consequences of. So a very serious card in the deck. The Six of Pentacles represents giving and receiving, being magnanimous, gracious, charitable. The Seven of Pentacles represents long-term investment, taking stock. The Eight of Pentacles represents craftsmanship or craftspersonship and discipline. The Nine of Pentacles represents self-sufficiency. The Ten of Pentacles, another popular card in the Minor Arcana, represents wealth, legacy, family stability. The Page of Pentacles represents practical learning, being slow and steady in one's progress, making wise, calculated choices. The Queen of Pentacles represents nurturing prosperity. The King of Pentacles, mastery of the material world. And so if we were to summarize this suit's arc, we would say that it starts with a seed is planted, resources are balanced, skills grow, stability is protected, hardship tests, resilience, generosity flows, patience develops, mastery is earned, abundance arrives, and legacy is built. So let's move on to the wands. So the wands, the spirit's journey. The Ace of Wands represents that creative spark. The Two of Wands represents planning and vision. The Three of Wands represents expansion and progress. The Four of Wands represents celebration and stability. The Five of Wands represents competition, petty one-upmanship, or petty up-personship, strife, bickering, conflict. The Six of Wands represents victory. The Seven of Wands, standing your ground. The Eight of Wands represents swift movement, also communication. The Nine of Wands represents resilience, strength under fire, a war-seasoned veteran at whatever it is the person's involved with. And defending and standing their ground. The Ten of Wands represents burdens, backstabbing, betrayals, a very challenging card. The Page of Wands represents creative enthusiasm. The Knight of Wands represents bold action. Fiery, remember, fiery energy. Maybe too bold. Here I would say measure twice, cut once. Somewhat hasty action. The Queen of Wands represents charismatic confidence. And the King of Wands represents inspired leadership. And so if we were to examine the arc, its summary, we would say it begins with a spark ignites, plans form, expansion begins, foundations are celebrated, competition arises, victory is earned, defenses strengthen out of need, momentum accelerates, resilience is tested, burdens accumulate, and then lastly, leadership emerges. In a way, forged in a fire. The person comes out improved, strengthened. Now let's take a look at swords. This, of course, is representative of the mind. So lots of things about thoughts, ideas, cognitions. So the mind's journey. The Ace of Swords represents mental clarity. The Two of Swords represents difficult decisions. But also, I would add to this that the answer is closer than you might realize. And you've limited your choice to just in a this or that dichotomous kind of cognition when there may be other alternatives that you're not considering. So getting fixated on two possible outcomes. So sort of difficult decision making. But there may be another option that you're not considering because you get so fixated on this in seeing it in that way, in a limited view. The Three of Swords represents heartbreak and also truth. And so although betrayal is hard, it's illuminating. So better that you know than to go along and don't realize you're being taken advantage of or betrayed, right? So a harsh but important lesson. The Four of Swords represents rest, recuperation, and recovery. And it's obvious why it would follow the Three of Swords, right? So the Five of Swords represents conflict and ego. And this is mirrored in the Five of Wands, that there's strife, conflict, competition, petty egotism. Best to try to stay out of that kind of stuff, even if you're pulled into it. So using your mind in a strategic, wise way is the prescription for that card. The Six of Swords, moving on. Sometimes that's the best thing to do, rather than to accuse or to assign blame or to split hairs or try to get someone to reason with you who's unreasonable. It's just not worth it. Sometimes the best thing to do is move on. Seven of Swords, strategy or deception. This is also known as the Thief card, the spying card. So if you had a reading about a partner, a friend, and that came out, I would be really on guard about that person or the situation. So it's definitely a warning card. You have a traitor in your midst, possibly. The Eight of Swords, also a challenging mental card. And so feeling restricted, tied in, mental restriction. But here again, this card is deceptive, because what it's saying is that you've backed yourself into this corner, and similar to the Two of Swords, and yet the solution is right there. You know, you have to MacGyver this situation. You have to be clever, Inspector Gadget kind of thinking, where you could, oh wait, I can get out this way. I wasn't even thinking of that. So only focusing on the negative, you might miss out on the positive solution, the only solution that you're not considering. The Nine of Swords, another challenging card. Anxiety, the long night of the soul, over exhausting your mind with ruminations, intrusive thoughts. So one of the the prescriptions, if you will, for this card is meditation, mindfulness. Remove yourself from the toxic situation. And then this gets even more intense. So the Nine of Swords then is only followed by the Ten of Swords, painful and ending, enduring a difficult situation. But it's also indicative of the end of the bad time. So if you look at the card, the sunrise is on the horizon. So you went through this dark night, and so the only way is up. And so I would connect this card in some ways to the Star card, because the Star card, although a beautiful card in the Major Arcana, is basically, you know, the only way is up at this point. You've reached a bottom. You've had some issue, and so the Star is hopeful. So in many ways, even though a difficult card, we can at least say the worst has happened, and so we are now, anything we do next is a positive towards a better outcome moving forward. Then we move over to the Page of Swords, and this one is associated with curiosity and vigilance, being aware, and also an intense card. Can become, as we'll see in the next card, aggression. So let's look at the Knight of Swords. This is swift action, a fast-moving energy. And again, it cautions being too quick to act and then ask questions later, kind of thing. And that can be bad. So sometimes it's best to have a calculated risk. Using your mind in the correct way. Maybe the first thought that comes to your mind isn't the best, and you march forward on your horse as a charging knight, but maybe that is not the best. So there's a caution around that card. Next, we have the Queen of Swords. This is clear communication. She's also a no-nonsense kind of queen, and so wouldn't mess with this queen. If you're going to do dealings, or if this might be you, that you don't tolerate, you don't suffer fools, and like the Queen in Alice in Wonderland, off with their head kind of thing. So it has a lot of different archetypes within that. And then we have the King of Swords, intellectual mastery. And so if we were to look at this arc and summarize it, it begins with a truth is revealed, a choice must be made, pain is confronted, rest is needed, conflict escalates, transition begins, strategy emerges, and fear traps the mind. Anxiety peaks, endings arrive, and then we get to clarity and mastery. So these are the arcs of the Minor Arcana. I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate your comments and your subscriptions. And we can employ these archetypes, these minor arcana for our everyday, if you're not sure about something, you can utilize them in this way. They're more of a weather vane or a barometer of what's happening right now. And sometimes we need that kind of clarity, whereas the major arcana are just too big. Anytime I do a reading and I have a client who has many major arcana, I tell them immediately, this is a big situation, a cycle has to work its way. There's nothing really you could do. You just have to, whether it's good or bad, you have to just let it flow and let it follow its course. But when we have minor arcanas come up, these are more in your everyday, you have more say in what's happening, you have a more direct link, and you can make more choices. So again, I hope you enjoyed this. Be well, and as always, God is love.